Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take a whole stack of sources on a big topic and, well, we try to pull out the key insights you really need.
Get you up to speed quickly.
Exactly. And today, we're focusing on just one single decisive day in history. A day that, didn't just settle a battle. It fundamentally built the political, even the social framework for Japan for what, over 200 years?
That's right. A massive shift.
We are diving deep into the Battle of Sekigahara. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, and our sources, they're quite clear on this. Sekigahara wasn't just like the last fight in a long war. It was really the moment of national transformation.
The turning point.
Absolutely. So for you listening, the mission here is to really get how this one battle, Sekigahara, was the absolute key. The hinge that swung Japan from, almost a century and a half of brutal civil war.
Constant fighting
into this long period of, unprecedented peace and stability, all under the Tokugawa Shogunate, which it established. It's the pivot point, chaos to control, basically.
And to really feel the weight of that achievement, we have to start by looking at just how bad things were before 1600. I mean, the state of Japan before Ieyasu, the political system was, it was broken, wasn't it?
Oh, completely. The period before the Sengoku period, the warring states, it wasn't just, a few battles here and there. Instability was almost the default setting.
Right.
For over 100 years, there wasn't really a functioning central government. The sources stress this over a century of fragmented rule. Imagine that. Constantly shifting alliances, daily life totally disrupted, massive armies marching back and forth.
Fought by these regional lords, not even against foreigners.
Exactly. Between competing daimyo, powerful feudal lords.
And that constant conflict wasn't just bloodshed, was it? It sounds crippling for the whole country.
It was. When you've got these powerful daimyo all fighting for the top spot, loyalty means very little. Building roads, bridges, forget it. And ordinary people living under constant threat. It was just systemic distrust everywhere. What's fascinating here is just how long it lasted and the nature of it. These daimyo, they acted like little kings. They had their own money, their own huge armies, always challenging whatever weak central authority was left.
So by 1600, things had to change.
Everyone knew it couldn't go on, but the power struggle was just so intense, so many entrenched interests after generations of this. It felt like only a huge winner-takes-all fight could possibly settle it.
Okay, so enter Tokugawa Ieyasu, the previous big unifier. Toyotomi Hideyoshi, he died, right? But he hadn't quite sealed the deal.
Not quite. He'd made huge progress, but his death left a power vacuum, and that set the stage for this final clash. It became pretty clear Ieyasu wasn't just going to step aside. He aimed to finish the job, seize total control.
He saw his moment.
Absolutely. The year 1600, that's when it all boils over. Ieyasu, he'd been playing the long game, smart alliances, political maneuvering, but he knew eventually he'd have to face down the opposition directly.
And that opposition gathered around loyalists to Hideyoshi's regime.
That's right. Primarily led by a figure named Ishida Mitsunari. They wanted to protect Hideyoshi's young heir and, stop Ieyasu.
Which brings us right to Sekigahara, October 21st, 1600. This is it. The slow burn civil war suddenly focuses into this one massive battle for everything.
The future of Japan, yeah.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the sheer scale of it was just enormous.
Oh, it was a monster. Logistically incredible. You're talking over 160,000 soldiers packed into this one valley. Think about that for the year 1600.
Huge.
On one side, the Eastern Army, that's Tokugawa Ieyasu. Determined, calculating, ready to found a dynasty.
And facing him,
the Western Army, led by Ishida Mitsunari. Fighting at least ostensibly for the Toyotomi heir, trying to keep Ieyasu contained, the stakes couldn't have been higher for either side.
Now, looking at the accounts of the battle, it sounds like this incredibly messy, muddy fight. But it wasn't just about swords and spears, was it? The politics behind the scenes seems almost more important.
That's absolutely the core insight. Sekigahara was decisive less because of pure military tactics and more because of, political calculation. Ieyasu basically orchestrated an implosion within the enemy ranks.
How so?
Well, while the main forces were locked in combat, several key daimyo on the western side were, let's say, hesitant. Or, more accurately, they'd been approached by Ieyasu's people beforehand. Promises made, deals struck.
The defections, like the famous one, Kobayakawa Hideyoshi. He had a big force, right? In a key spot.
Exactly. He was positioned on a hill overlooking the whole battlefield. His troops were supposed to charge down and hit Ieyasu's flank. Crucial move for the Western Army.
But he didn't move.
He hesitated, just watched. And Ieyasu, sensing this, apparently ordered his own troops to fire at Kobayakawa's position. Not to attack, but like a signal. Like, make your choice now.
Well, talk about pressure.
And it worked. Kobayakawa made his choice. He ordered his troops to attack, but not Ieyasu. He turned on his own allies in the Western army down below.
That must have been devastating.
It was the domino. That single betrayal just shattered the Western army's morale and formation. What could have been a long, grinding battle turned into a rout. Over in a matter of hours, really. The future decided right there.
Not in weeks of sieges, but in one afternoon.
That decisiveness is so important. Ieyasu's victory wasn't marginal, it was total. It wiped out the main opposition in one go. It gave him undeniable military and political authority to impose a new order.
If it had been a draw or a narrow win.
The fragmentation, the Sengoku chaos, it probably would have just dragged on, maybe for decades more. But Sekigahara was a clean break.
So the immediate result, Ieyasu establishes the Tokugawa Shogunate. But was that foundation solid right away? I mean, were people just ready for peace, or did he still face challenges?
Oh, he definitely faced challenges. You don't just dismantle a century of warlord power overnight. Many daimyo were probably just waiting, watching for a chance to rebel.
So he couldn't just rely on the victory itself?
No way. He learned from Hideyoshi's mistakes. The victory gave him the foundation, sure, but keeping it meant building institutions, putting policies in place specifically designed to stop anyone else from challenging the center, basically taking away their ability to fight back.
Okay, so restructuring the whole system. The sources mention two really key policies that helped transition Japan from war to peace into what we call the Edo period. First one, cracking down on the warlords' armies, outlawing private armies.
That was huge, absolutely revolutionary for the time. To make the peace stick, the shogunate had to take away the daimyo's main source of independent power, their soldiers. So strict rules on how many samurai they could have, what kind of fortifications they could build.
Even controlling weapons.
Yeah, controlling who could even own weapons. This wasn't just military, it was social engineering too. You see the famous katanagari, the sword hunts.
Taking weapons from farmers, peasants.
Exactly. Disarming the commoners, solidifying the samurai as the only ones allowed to carry swords, the only ones responsible for enforcing order. So you disarm the population, you limit the daimyo's military power. You basically dismantle the armed society that fueled the Sengoku Wars. It creates this sense of, well, submission to central authority.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the result was this incredibly long peace. That stability lasted until 1868. That's the main takeaway, right? This longevity.
It really is. That peace was enforced, constantly managed. And that brings us to the second big policy, national isolation. Sakoku. It sounds extreme, but it was a deliberate strategy.
To stop outside threats from messing with the internal stability they just created.
Precisely. It was like building a strategic firewall around Japan. They saw what happened when European traders and missionaries arrived and added another layer of instability.
Because some daimyo, especially in the south, were converting, trading, getting access to European weapons and ideas.
That's exactly right. The shogunate saw foreign influence, especially Christianity, as a direct political threat. They worried missionaries were just the first step towards foreign invasion or providing rebellious lords with outside help.
So they shut the door.
Pretty much. Severely limited trade, expelled foreigners, banned Japanese from traveling abroad. By doing that, they stopped any daimyo from getting an edge through foreign connections or technology. It ensured all power struggles, if they happened, remained internal and manageable by Edo.
So Sekigahara leads to these two huge pillars for the next 250 years. Internal disarmament and strict social order and external isolation.
Yes, a system designed to last, and it did. The Tokugawa Shogunate ruled for over 2.5 centuries. They stabilized the economy, cities grew, culture flourished in many ways. The sources rightly call it an era of relative peace and stability. I mean, compare that globally. Very few ruling families anywhere kept control over such a big territory for so long.
It really is a striking example. One battle, Sekigahara, basically launches this complete political and social makeover that defines Japan for generations.
Yeah, this deep dive really shows you how that centralized government in Edo, modern Tokyo, just completely replaced the old chaotic system of warring daimyo. It solidified the structure that defined Japan right up until the modern era began with the Meiji Restoration.
So what does this all mean? It means you can literally trace the entire political setup, the class system, even the unique cultural developments of Edo Japan, right back to the outcome of that one fight in 1600.
Yeah.
It's just a staggering example of political consolidation after a military win. The end of the war was truly the beginning of that whole era's identity.
And this raises an important question. You know, the Tokugawa achieved this incredible peace, this stability, partly through these really restrictive policies like Sengoku, the national isolation. So you have to wonder, what were the long-term trade-offs? When Japan was finally forced open in the mid-19th century, did that long period of isolation leave it behind in some ways, technologically, culturally? Did stability come at the cost of maybe falling behind the rest of the world in certain developments?
That's a fascinating thought. What was the ultimate price paid for 2.5 centuries of internal peace?
Exactly. That's something really worth thinking about on your own.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping right into one of history's really high-stakes moments, the Battle of Sekigahara, 1600. Now, you probably picture these massive armies clashing, right? Mist everywhere. And yeah, that happened, but it kind of misses the real story. This wasn't just a battle. It was basically the moment Japan's future was decided. A huge civil war, all boiled down to one fight in one valley. Who rules for the next, 2.5 centuries? It all hung right there. So our mission here in this deep dive is to look past the battlefield chaos. We've got the data on the armies, the Eastern Army, Tokugawa Ieyasu side, and the Western Army under Ishida Mitsunari. We want to uncover the real advantage. And the sources, they point pretty clearly. It wasn't brute force, it was politics, betrayal, actually, and some really smart pre-game intelligence.
Yeah, and just to kick things off, the sheer scale here is something else. This wasn't some minor skirmish. We're talking combined forces, maybe 74,000 on the, let's say, conservative end, all the way up to potentially 120,000 soldiers, all packed into that valley. I mean, think about the logistics of that. Early 17th century, getting that many people fed, moved, coordinated, convincing powerful lords, these daimyo, to risk everything. It just shows both sides knew this was it, the final move for control of Japan.
Okay, so let's unpack the leaders, because right away, there's a huge difference, strategically speaking. Eastern Army leader, Tokugawa Ieyasu. This guy wasn't just a general. He was like the ultimate political operator, known for being patient, cunning, knowing which way the wind was blowing.
Then you look at the Western side, Ishida Mitsunari, and this is where the sources really flag a fundamental weakness. Mitsunari was loyal to the old regime, sure, he helped pull the coalition together, but he's consistently described as basically a court bureaucrat, an administrator, not really a seasoned field commander who could, command that kind of gut loyalty from these really fierce independent warlords.
And that lack of command cred becomes super important when you look at the numbers, right? Yeah. Because just counting heads, you'd think the West had it in the bag. Yeah, the Western Army was bigger. Estimates are like 80,000, maybe up to 120,000 if everyone actually showed up and fought. Ieyasu's Eastern Army, smaller, maybe 74,000, possibly 88,000. So fewer troops.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is, okay, the West has more raw power, more bodies on the field, but the data, even early on, suggests the East had this massive edge in something else entirely. Internal coordination, unity. Ieyasu had a team, basically, working towards his vision. Mitsunari, he had a collection of powerful guys who, frankly, often didn't even like him much, held together by circumstance, not real loyalty.
Right. Okay, let's dive deeper then into Ieyasu's Eastern Army. What made them so effective, even being slightly outnumbered? You mentioned quality psychological stuff.
Well, you absolutely have to start with the vanguard in Aomasa. He led the charge, and his troops wore this iconic red armor, instantly recognizable. And that wasn't just for looks. Think about the battlefield. Probably misty, confusing, seeing that flash of red, that told everyone exactly who was there. Ieyasu's elite. It was a psychological weapon.
Okay, so it's like a brand, but on the battlefield. A warning sign for the enemy, and maybe a morale boost for your own side.
Precisely. And he wasn't alone. You had other absolute legends backing him up, like Honda Tadakatsu. They called him the warrior who surpassed death, supposedly never seriously wounded in battle. These weren't just commanders, they were figures. Their presence alone meant something, added real weight.
So the East had the star power, the elite troops. But where was the real edge? Was it the tech, the guns, or something quieter?
It was definitely quieter. I mean, yes, Ieyasu's army was modern for the time, disciplined. They had samurai cavalry, ashigaru foot soldiers, mounted archers, and crucially, lots of matchlock gunners, the tepput ashigaru. But his real ace, politics, we can see it in the records. He wasn't just prepping his own army. For months beforehand, he was working behind the scenes, sending messages, making promises, getting assurances from powerful lords who were supposed to be on Mitsunari's side, securing neutrality or even outright defection. That was a secret weapon. Political maneuvering, intelligence gathering, already paid for, already operational.
Wow. So the Eastern Army, tight-knit, disciplined, well-armed, led by a political genius who already knew some of the enemy were going to switch sides. Okay, now let's look to the Western Army. Mitsunari's coalition. They've got the numbers, but it sounds like a shaky alliance. Who was actually in it? It was diverse, that's for sure. You had big names like Yukita Hidei in the center. Shimazu Yoshihiro, known for being incredibly tough, fiercely independent. And interestingly, Konishi Yukinaga, an experienced general, but also a Christian daimyo, which just shows you how fragmented this group really was, holding different loyalties, different backgrounds.
And troop-wise, they had the standard stuff. Spear guys, heavy cavalry, arquebusiers. The equipment wasn't really the fatal flaw. So here's a question for you. Why didn't those huge numbers matter when push came to shove on the battlefield?
Because the foundation was weak.
Right.
The loyalty just wasn't solid. Built on sand, like you said.
Exactly right. The sources highlight, too, just crushing internal problems that basically doomed them before a shot was fired. First, Muri Teramoto. He was the most powerful lord in the whole Western coalition, technically the nominal leader of the entire effort. But he never fully committed his main force. His huge army, the biggest single contingent that would get them to that 120,000 number, stayed put. Miles away in Osaka Castle, just sat there. That's not just being absent. That's like the chairman of the board refusing to vote on the company's future. It left this massive hole strategically and psychologically.
That is a huge chunk missing right from the start.
Wow. And you said there was a second weakness, something more immediate. Yeah, the second weakness was playing out right there on the battlefield itself. Even among the troops who did show up, several key commanders, guys with big forces, were positioned up on the high ground like on Mount Matsuo, overlooking everything. Prime spot, but their loyalty already compromised. Ieyasu had gotten to them. Mitsunari, the administrator, he just didn't have the clout, the personal respect to keep these powerful, independent lords in line.
Okay, so this is where Ieyasu's political plotting pays off. On the actual battlefield, all that quiet work turns into, well, chaos for the other side. Because the sources say the defections during the battle weren't just side issues, they were the absolute turning point, the decisive moment. And we have to talk about Kobayakawa Hideyoshi. He's the main one, right? Commanding something like 15,000 troops on Mount Matsuo, that key position.
Exactly. A huge force, critically positioned, and Hideyoshi was wavering. He'd apparently promised Ieyasu he'd switch sides, but when the fighting started, he just hesitated, froze. So the accounts say Ieyasu, seeing this, realizing the moment could slip away, he did something pretty bold. He ordered his own gunners to fire at Hideyoshi's position.
Wait, he shot at the guys he wanted on his side?
Yeah.
To make them switch?
Yeah. Not to wipe them out, but to basically force his hand, like a, hey, remember our deal? Time to move kind of message, delivered by arquebus fire.
That's incredible pressure. Did it work?
It worked perfectly. Faced with fire from the guys he was supposed to join, Hideyoshi finally ordered the charge. Down the mountain, imagine seeing that. 15,000 troops suddenly peeling off and slamming right into the flank of their supposed allies, specifically Otani Yoshitsugu's forces, who were holding firm for the west. It must have been devastating. Cataclysmic, really.
And that was the signal, wasn't it? The moment everyone else on the fence knew which way the wind was blowing, the dominoes started falling.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It triggered a complete internal collapse for the Western Army. Once Hideyoshi moved, several other commanders who were maybe hedging their bets, they saw the writing on the wall, they switched sides immediately, jumped ship to get in good with the obvious winner, Tokugawa. The list is pretty significant. Wakisaka, Yasuharu, Ogawa Skitada, Bakazana Yasusu, Kutsuki Mototsuna.
4 more major commanders turning coat mid-battle, turning their weapons on the guys they were just fighting alongside.
Think about that. It's just the immediate, visible proof of Ieyasu's months and months of political groundwork paying off right when it mattered most.
So that internal rot, that instability, just completely neutralized the West's bigger numbers.
Yeah.
They had the head count, but it didn't have the cohesion. They couldn't use it. And the strategic advantage we talked about earlier, Ieyasu's political smarts, his intelligence network, that's what won the day. It wasn't really about the fighting itself in the end. It led to a fast, decisive victory.
Yeah, a conclusive victory.
And that victory, of course, cemented the Tokugawa Shogunate.
Yeah.
Kicked off this long period of relative peace in Japan over 250 years. The sources just make it so clear. Sekigahara wasn't won by the toughest army, necessarily. It was won by the smartest political operator, the guy with the best intelligence game before anyone even drew a sword.
So, okay, what does this all tell us? You look at the facts. The Western Army had more soldiers, maybe better initial ground, even the sort of moral high ground defending the old regime's legacy. Yet they lost, decisively. Sekigahara really offers this profound lesson about power, doesn't it? Was it maybe the world's first major intel victory on this scale? And the question, I think, for you listening is this. In any big strategic fight, politics, business, military, whatever, how much does knowing who to influence, who might flip, how much does that matter compared to just having more resources or raw power? Sekigahara kind of suggests that maybe, just maybe, the ultimate victory often goes to the side that can exploit divisions, fracture unity, and turn an enemy's apparent strength against itself. Something to think about. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're heading back to Japan, specifically the year 1600. We're going right into the heart of the Battle of Sekigahara.
A pivotal moment, no doubt about it.
Absolutely pivotal. I mean, this wasn't just another battle. Sekigahara basically decided who is going to run Japan for the next couple of centuries. It paved the way for the Tokugawa Shogunate.
250 years of relative stability.
Yeah.
All stemming from this one-day conflict.
And our mission today, our deep dive, is really focused. We want to get into the sources and figure out why. Why did Tokugawa Ieyasu pull off such a decisive win against Ishida Mitsunari and the Western Army? Because, looking at the initial setup, Mitsunari seemed to have the edge.
He did, strategically speaking, on paper.
Right, so it wasn't just about who had more soldiers, was it? It feels like a mix of smart strategy, good timing, maybe some luck, and definitely a lot of political maneuvering.
That's exactly right. The sources really bear this out. Ieyasu's victory wasn't purely military. It was heavily influenced by intelligence, coordination, and crucially, defections. Political loyalty, or the lack thereof, played a massive role.
Okay, let's unpack that initial setup then. Talk us through Mitsunari's plan. He chose the location, Sekigahara Valley. He must have felt pretty confident, yeah.
Oh, definitely. Mitsunari was known as a capable strategist, and he used the terrain, brilliantly. You have this valley, right? Mostly flat, but surrounded by hills. He placed his key forces up on those hillsides. Mount Matsuo, Mount Nangu, prime positions overlooking the valley floor.
So the idea was to lure Ieyasu's eastern army down into the valley, like a kill zone.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
A classic envelopment strategy, a pincer movement. The plan was, once Ieyasu's troops were engaged in the main fight down below, the forces on the hill, especially the Kobayakawa troops on Mount Matsuo and the Muchi contingent on Mount Nangu, would charge down, crush Ieyasu from the flanks, and rear against the main western line.
Sounds like a solid plan. Almost foolproof if you just look at the map. So, what went wrong, and how quickly?
Well, that's the thing. It started to go wrong almost immediately. The whole brilliant terrain advantage, completely undermined by politics.
Politics again.
The trap just never sprung properly, because those key flanking forces, the ones needed to close the pincer, they either didn't move when ordered, or worse, they switched sides.
The famous betrayal. This is where Kobayakawa Hideyoshi comes in, right? This seems to be the moment everyone points to.
It's absolutely central. You really can't talk about Sekigahara without talking about Kobayakawa. He was a young daimyo, but commanded a significant force.
And he was positioned on Mount Matsuo, the key western hill.
Exactly. Perfectly placed to deliver a decisive blow for Mitsunari. But he was also, let's say, politically available. Ieyasu had been working on him.
So it wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment decision during the battle. This was premeditated.
The groundwork was certainly laid. Ieyasu was a master politician. He knew Hideyoshi felt overlooked, maybe even insulted, by Mitsunari. And Ieyasu apparently made promises, land, status,
The usual incentives.
The usual, yes. And crucially, Ieyasu's intelligence network seems to have confirmed that Hideyoshi was seriously considering switching sides. He was just waiting. Hesitating.
So picture this. The battle is raging down in the valley. Mitsunari is probably getting anxious, waiting for Kobayakawa's charge from the hill, but nothing happens. What finally pushed him?
Well, the story goes, and it's a famous one, that Ieyasu got impatient, seeing Hideyoshi just sitting up there on Mount Matsuo doing nothing.
Yeah.
Ieyasu supposedly ordered some of his troops, his arquebusiers, to fire at Kobayakawa's position. Not a full assault, but a strong hint, a provocation.
Like a make-up-your-mind-now kind of signal.
Exactly. It forced Hideyoshi's hand. He had to commit, either attack Ieyasu as planned, or take Ieyasu's offer and turn on his supposed allies.
And he chose Ieyasu. He ordered his troops down the mountain, but aimed them at the Western Army's flank instead. Mid-battle treason.
Absolutely. And the effect was, devastating, instantaneous. Just think about the shock, the psychological blow to Mitsunari's men.
Your ally on the high ground is suddenly charging your own lines.
Right. It shattered their morale, first off. completely disrupted their formation. And second, it acted like a signal to other wavering commanders.
The domino effect you mentioned.
Precisely. Seeing Kobayakawa defect, others who might have been on the fence likely thought, okay, this is how it's going, and they either pulled back, refused to engage, or even joined the attack on Mitsunari's forces.
But hang on, you also mentioned the Mushi clan on the other hill, Mount Nangu. Kobayakawa attacked, but what did the Mushi do? Did they join in?
No, and that's almost as important. The Mushi forces were huge, a massive part of the Western Army's strength. But Ieyasu's agents had also been busy there.
So they were neutralized too?
Effectively, yes. They had apparently reached an understanding with Ieyasu. They wouldn't defect actively like Kobayakawa, but they agreed simply not to fight, to sit tight.
Wow. So one wing of the pincer actively attacks Mitsunari, and the other wing just stays put. Watches.
Exactly. Mitsunari's trap failed in two catastrophic ways. One flank turned traitor, the other refused orders. The whole envelopment plan just evaporated. The confusion and panic must have been immense. Western Army lines just started to dissolve.
So Ieyasu wasn't just lucky. He didn't just benefit from one guy changing his mind. He actively engineered the failure of Mitsunari's strategy through political deals beforehand. This speaks volumes about his intelligence network, doesn't it?
It really does. Ieyasu wasn't marching into that valley blind. He had extensive intelligence. He knew about the simmering resentments, the secret talks, the weaknesses in Mitsunari's coalition well before the fighting started.
How did knowing that change how he fought the battle? He must have felt more confident taking certain risks.
Absolutely. Knowing that key enemy units were unlikely to attack, or might even help him, freed up his options. He could commit his main forces more aggressively in the center, for instance. He didn't have to worry quite so much about those flanking forces on the hills because he had, let's say, political insurance against them.
And the timing. The attack started early, on a misty morning. Was that just chance or part of the plan?
Probably calculated. The mist could obscure troop movements, which might normally favor a defender with high ground, but Ieyasu, knowing those high ground positions were politically compromised, well, the mist maybe helped him more, concealing his own deployments while he felt reasonably sure a coordinated attack wouldn't come from the hills.
Okay, so down on the battlefield floor, you have the Western Army in growing chaos and confusion, looking over their shoulders, while Ieyasu's Eastern Army is presumably fighting as a more cohesive unit.
That's the contrast, yes. The sources suggest Ieyasu's forces showed much better coordination. Command and control held up. The Western Army, fractured by betrayal and doubt, seemed to lose structure. Communication likely broke down.
And tactically, how did that coordination show itself? Was it just about morale?
It seems to have been more than morale. Logistically, Ieyasu's army appeared better organized. They combined their arms effectively using musket fire to disrupt enemy lines, followed by organized pushes with spear infantry, and then well-timed cavalry charges. It was a more integrated approach, this organized force hitting an enemy that was psychologically reeling and losing cohesion. The result was pretty inevitable. They overwhelmed the loyal Western units. Ieyasu's army fought with purpose. Mitsunari's was trying to figure out who was still on their side.
So putting it all together, the image of Sekigahara as just a massive samurai clash isn't quite right, is it? It sounds more like a political assassination carried out on a battlefield.
That's a good way to put it. The core conclusion really is that Ieyasu's victory wasn't won by swords and spears alone. Not primarily. It hinged on his political maneuvering before the battle. He turned Mitsunari's greatest strategic assets, those hills, into fatal weaknesses through deals and betrayals.
He didn't just defeat the enemy army. He dismantled it from within, turning its own strengths against it. An incredible feat of political warfare, really.
And that victory paved the way for everything that followed. The end of the Sengoku period, the unification under the Tokugawa Shogunate, the long Edo peace, it all traces back to Ieyasu's ability to exploit political fault lines at Sekigahara.
It really underscores how a brilliant tactical setup, like Mitsunari's hilltop envelopment, is worthless if the political will, the loyalty holding it together, isn't solid. Kobayakawa's single decision shattered the whole thing.
The foundation was sand, essentially.
Which brings us to our final thought for you, the listener. We see this huge historical turning point, the unification of Japan, hinging so critically on one commander's timely betrayal, Kobayakawa Hideyoki's political calculation. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? How often do the biggest shifts in history depend less on grand strategy and noble causes, and more on a single, perhaps cynical act of political opportunism? Something to think about.